all started from the national championship game, and I've been dealing with this for 2 years now. And understanding, like, yeah, negative things have probably been said about me, but honestly, I'll take that because look where women's basketball is. People are talking about women's basketball, but you never would think that we'd be talking about women's basketball. People are pulling up to games. We got celebrities coming to games, sold out arenas, like, just because of one single game. And just looking at that, like, I'll take that role. I'll take the bad guy role, and I'll continue to take that on and be that for my teammates. And if I want to be that, and I know I'll go down in history, I'll look back in 20 years and be like, yeah, the reason why we watching women's basketball is not just because of one person. It's because of me, too, and I want y'all to realize that.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome once again to the Student of the Game. I am Kyle Nass, the Student of the Game. And listen, if you're here, chances are you like talking sport. And listen, for this time of year, we got an awful lot of it. Like, I'm not even touching NBA tonight because the finals is starting. I went over that quite a bit to preview that with Shukri Wrights last week. And listen, while we covered hockey for the East Side there and talked a little bit about what the finals may be with him some, I had to get a little bit of representation from the West. Jake Ferraro, I know him for Black and Gold Banneret first, but he's here representing What a Hockey, having covered the Dallas Stars, and he'll talk a little bit about his stuff going on with hockey out West with the Western semis and all of that. And listen, as a guy who follows Dallas, I'll put it this way, I have an excuse to drop this in here. I don't get to do South Park much on this show, but
they're not even a real country anyway.
At the end of the day, all I got to do is blame Canada. Anyways, we'll have Jake here on the show in a bit. Also following him, Matt Murschel, Orlando Sentinel, national college football writer. And listen, while all the stuff I'm talking with him about will transcend college football proper, I mean, we're touching on the EA Sports video game. He talked to the people out here just mere minutes away from the Student of the Game studios here in Maitland, Florida. Talked to them about the game, got some reveals, is able to break his silence, wrote an article about it on the Orlando Sentinel. Bing! He'll be in here to talk to us about that, about the implication of college football players being potentially paid directly, more things going on with the realignment in the Big 12, and what's this about Utah? Now there's a fight with Utah. Listen, you can tell I'm confused talking college football, and I write about it a lot for the Black and Gold Banneret. Bing! From the UCF perspective, at least. And when I'm this confused, I have no choice but to bring in the great Matt Murschel. He'll be on closer to 9:30. But before we bring Jake in to talk some NHL, let's get into this a little bit, because you heard the quote earlier. God, you're talking about hockey and football. Where does Angel Reese fit in? Well, for one, I just really got sick of the misrepresentation and clickbaiting of one Angel Reese and the out of context quote of her implying that people are watching the WNBA only because of her, and that being her statement. Over and above being patently false and clickbait bullcrap, the kind of stuff I expect Skip Bayless or Kendrick Perkins to engage in, that is the full statement. And folks, how can I be in any position to disagree with Angel Reese when the phenomenon she described happening, I talked about and predicted before it was cool, right? I talked about the stuff that went on with the, for the podcasters, I did the John Cena, you can't see me like she did. She did the whole ring finger gesture for those who are still hiding under the rock or are that new to the game, following Caitlin Clark, Angel Reese, and all of the newcomers, and only know who Kennedy Clark is because of her, what amounts to a street-level villain role in the Caitlin Clark comic book. That's where the real notoriety between these two really started to pop off. I know there are people out there, no disrespect. Shout out to my guy, Ray J. Lynn, the sports reporter without pay. Yes, I know there is life before that, but it's just not mainstream. People want to take shots at Stephen A. Smith. It's easy to do a lot of times about how he could have been talking about the WNBA 3 years ago. No, he couldn't. He has people he answers to. The WNBA wasn't popular enough then, all that other stuff. But I'm not here to take shots at some just wildly misappropriated opinions and just some I'll say hindsight-rich statements. Here's the fact of the case. The only hindsight I have for you is Angel Reese is right. The word antagonist is what we're looking for, folks, okay? Angel Reese is not a villain. She even refers to herself as the bad guy. And from a standpoint, it's smart she did that because I think what she's trying to tell us, and many people have misinterpreted because social media, what she's trying to tell us is she's willing to embrace the narrative placed upon her as part of, I think Colin Cowherd even called it today, character development, to help make the NBA in part what it was, right? But Kyle, Caitlin Clark's the main draw. Okay, listen, Ray Charles could see that. And if he were still alive, he could still see that despite his blindness. See what I did there? But I'm just going full insensitive tonight, apparently. I'm going after Canada. I'm making dead people jokes. Anyways, but we all know Caitlin Clark's the main draw, all right? There's a reason why a cheap shot on her from Kennedy Carter went as viral as it did. And nobody's saying that women's basketball should be softer. I'm not. And if they are, they're wrong. Folks, I've covered UCF women's basketball I'm going to be going into I did it for the past 3 years. These ladies play hard. I liken it to 90s NBA basketball. I'm not going to go quite as far as 80s and Bill Laimbeer, but there was a lot of physicality, especially previous to Coach Tia Messer and all that. And now Georgia coach, Katie Abrahamson Henderson, Coach Abe, as we called her then, was at UCF. We did a lot of coverage for them with the black and gold banneret. Punchline is, those ladies did a lot of battle. Massimi Kaba even tried out for the Chicago Sky. See the connection? Angel Reese, Chicago, right? Yeah. And didn't make it. Right? So the physicality aspect of the game is still there. Nobody's mad about that per se. And if they are, it's good that we're educating them. Please don't do it by saying, well, in a football game, basketball is not football. If you're making a comparison to culture in hockey with basketball, you've already gotten it wrong. Okay? Keep it within the sport. In the 90s in the NBA, a lot of more physical play, and it's more on par, women's basketball, underneath the basket, than that. They don't have 7-footers that can shoot it from the cheap seats yet in the WNBA. There is no Victoria Wembanyama yet. Okay? So I don't see that day coming for the women's basketball like the NBA did. It might evolve into that at some point, but we're not there. But going back to Angel Reese, she's right. People would not be watching at the way they are without her being present. But Kyle, I thought you just said Caitlin Clark was a main attraction. She absolutely is. Here's the thing, folks. Let's stick with the word antagonist. I hate the word villain. It's a bad implication. It implies that Angel Reese is doing wrong. And maybe you don't agree with her clapping it up when Kennedy Carter cheap shotted her in the back, and maybe you weren't a fan of her getting with what she did, getting ejected from a game in the past couple nights here. That doesn't bother me personally, the ejection part. You want to take the risk of clapping up another player getting cheap shotted, you do so at your own peril. Karma's a rough thing, and in the pros, players get back at each other. But the one thing she is not wrong on is she is Caitlin Clark's main antagonist as far as the mainstream is concerned. I know that Caitlin Clark didn't win a ring. I know that Caitlin Clark may have beat LSU but didn't get a ring the next year because she lost to a different team. None of that matters. What got the first headlines was the lamestream media and you same folks griping about cheap shots and how they're being too soft and they're trying to protect Caitlin and all these other falsehoods. The problem is that got you to your TV to start watching this. And listen, I'm no WNBA expert. I'm not there. I'm just a guy who watches sport and observe. The women's basketball I follow is at the college level, and it's been at the Big 12, and I'm still learning at a great rate. Okay? But I'm still smart enough to understand that Angel Reese is merely acknowledging she is Thanos to the Avengers. She is Lex Luthor to Batman. She's Joker. Or, excuse me, Lex Luthor to Superman. She's Joker to Batman. Oh my gosh, I almost got my nerd card revoked. All right. She's popular enough to be Deadpool for the WNBA. Not necessarily the guy you want to think of when you think hero or role model or anything like that. Maybe, though. I think she's a fine role model in her own right. Has always been a player that's been present in regards to the Caitlin Clark dialogue. Yes, she is a part of the Ascendant. Maybe Caitlin Clark is the star, but in the novel, in the comic book, in the movie, in the character development that is this rookie class of the WNBA, you better bet she's at the very least the antagonist. So there you go. But anyways, with all that in mind, it's about ready to time to jump over to the NHL. And listen, my guy, like I said, he's done great work with the Black and Gold Banneret covering basketball, but I bring him here for his role with the site What a Hockey, where he's covered the Dallas Stars. He has a top 10 moments for the Dallas Stars article up. Bing! Make sure you check that out. Let's bring in Jake Ferraro. What's going on, Jake?
Good evening, Kyle, and thank you for letting me on here to start. I think all Dallas fans would admit that was a gut-wrenching 6-game loss to the Edmonton Oilers. And the first question before you even ask me, is this worse than last year against the Golden Knights? 100%. They were up 2-1 in the series. They had a 2-0 lead in Game 4, and it completely evaporated. The Oilers made the adjustments, and at the end of the day, Stuart Skinner got hot at the absolute right time, and it all went downhill from there for the Stars.
I mean, listen, at least in the case of the Golden Knights, you're at least adjacently involved with an athletic group, a team that was once named the Golden Knights in UCF. Here, when it comes to Edmonton, all we got is South Park.
They're not even a real country anyway.
Thank you for that setup, Jake. Anyways, but I mean, listen, we've seen plenty of times in recent history here with goalies getting hot, whether it's Jonathan Quick, whether it's Brett Lundqvist. You know, those are the two names. Even me as a distant hockey casual, you know, that's just the death of a team in a playoff series in hockey, right?
It is. I mean, if you have a hot goaltender, you know, you have a chance to win it all. Aiden Hill, who was a nobody for most of his career, got red hot last year, and it helped for the Golden Knights. And in this case, it helped for the Oilers. And for the Stars, the depth players that they needed to show up clearly did not. Joe Pavelski was pointless in the series, and obviously yesterday he planned to not come back to the NHL for the 24-25 season. Matt Duchene, who scored the big goal to send the Stars to the conference finals, he was pointless. Mason Marchment, he only had 2 points. Jamie Benn went very quiet. Tyler Seguin went quiet after game 1. Dallas had a lot of guys very quiet, even Thomas Harley, defenseman, reliable. And the depth that was just not there. Edmonton made the changes. They were able to smother them. And, yeah, you outshoot a team in Game 6 by 25. Yes, 25. And you only scored once. I mean, what can you say? You ran into a hot goaltender.
Well, and you know, there's a lot of it too. I think something that's not made enough of a big enough a deal as somebody who, you know, dabbles in multiple sports. Like, I feel like in a lot of times on the ice, shot selection is something that's not really harped on quite enough. Do you feel like that they had that under control? You mentioned 25 more shots, but are these quality shots that they're taking? They
were in the final 2 minutes. They were having good passes, and Stuart Skinner toward the end was making saves. They were passing the puck around left and right, and they had some good shots in the middle, and they were working it around very well on the angles for Seguin to shoot, for Pavelski to shoot, for Johnston to shoot. You know, they were working it very well, but they just, in the end, they couldn't prevail with it. And it's unfortunate for Dallas. It's the second straight year that they've lost in 6 games in the conference finals, and they will be looking to make a push for a player, and I've already written an article about it on who they should be going after, and that's Mitch Marner.
Hey, where is that article found?
It is on What a Hockey, Bing, as you said. Trading for Mitch Marner Yes, trading for Mitch Marner at this point for the Stars, it makes sense. Some people have said, no, they're going to ask for a lot. I don't think so, because here's why. If you look at the status of the Maple Leafs, the future is uncertain. They got a lot of free agents this offseason. All three of their starting goaltenders who played, they're all free agents. John Klingberg's a free agent. Tyler Bertuzzi is a free agent. Max Domi's a free agent. Mark Giordano's a free agent. And they also have 1 year left with John Tavares and Jake McCabe. Now, Mitch Marner does have 1 more year left on his contract, yes. But if you remember in the first round, he got in a heated bench segment with Austin Matthews and William Nylander. And to me, I don't think he wants to be there anymore. Now, the asking price, it could be high, but it might not be, because with 1 year left on his deal, Dallas may not have to overpay, but he's had 3 90-point seasons in his career. He led the Maple Leafs in assists this year, and you need a superstar player to put you over the hump. And I think Marner would be the one that they should go after this offseason.
Well, and so let's assume that they land him, Jake. My question then becomes, does that keep the Dallas Stars window open? Do the Stars still shine through a championship window?
Absolutely. I mean, what's very hard to put into perspective is of all the contracts they have due in a 2-year span, because after next season, Jamie Benn's 8 or 9 year contract finally runs out. Esa Lindell's contract runs out. Wyatt Johnson's contract runs out. Ryan Suter's contract runs out. But it's a good problem to have when you got a lot of players on your team for depth and you can decide who you want to pay. The salary cap's going up next year. But let's say they trade for Marner. Give him the extension for 2-3 years. You don't have to overpay him right now. Like, you don't have to give him a Tyler Seguin 8-year deal. That you don't have to do. And I don't know if he'll see $10.9 million a year again, but even if they could get him for, like, let's say $7-8 million, I still think that's very worthy for Marner.
Yeah, and obviously, listen, just like in any sport, you know, the dollar amount connected to it, it's all still a business, and getting everything lined up there is obviously the most important to maintain a team. You know, if they get the right value, this is what keeps that window open. I completely see where you're coming from with that. Well, okay, so I'll say this. I know your article on whatahockey.com, bing, has the top 10 moments of the season through your eyes, but if you could give me one for the postseason, what's your favorite postseason moment? And if it happened to make your list for the article, let the people come over. But there is a postseason moment for your Dallas Stars there. What would you say that is?
Well, it's actually number 1 in the article, and it's number 1 in my eyes. It is defeating the Golden Knights in Game 7. Yes, I know, double overtime, Matt Duchene, second round, but at the end of the day, Dallas lost to Vegas in the conference finals last year in 6 games, and they got matched up with them again in the first round, and they were down 2-0. They had Game 7 in their own building. Place was raucous, and I can tell you that because I was there, and the unsung hero showed up, Radek Faksa. He scored the backhand goal, was the biggest goal of his career, and I kid you not, this was true. I'm at the game, it's second intermission, and the guy next to me and him are talking. I said, it has to be an unsung hero. What do you think? And he said Radek Faksa. I don't know if this guy's listening, but I remember he said Faksa, and as soon as he scored, I said, you called that beyond belief. It was, in my opinion, it's the best, because if you lose to the defending champions, again, it would have been another long summer. And for them to be the top seed, and if they would have lost to them at home in round 1, it would have been so deflating. But that to me was number 1. It was either that or Matt Duchene against Colorado. You probably could say it's 1A and 1B. You actually can.
Oh, see, you're one of those fence sitters. You and EJ Christian with your 1A and 1B stuff. All right, I'll let it go because you're talking some hockey and you're being a quality guest here, Jake. I gotta let you sneak that one in, but let's not make a habit of it. All right, but let's
not trying to, but it's very tough. If you ask Stars fans which was better, beating the Knights or Avalanche, I think it would be close 50-50, maybe 55-45.
Hey, listen, never underestimate the power of petty and a good revenge. I got no problem with it from that perspective too. And talking about how tough it was to watch the Edmonton loss, I can imagine there would be a multiplier applied to that pain if indeed the Golden Knights prevailed over the Stars, right?
Yeah, easily. I mean, you can't lose 2 in a row to the Knights.
What's the reverse of a star? There would be a black hole in your soul, right? I'm onto something there.
Yeah, probably would, or upside down star, sadness, something like that. You could do something like that.
We'll keep it in there, but it's so and I appreciate you elaborating a bit. Check out the piece on whatahockey.com. Bing. But so take me to the finals, because listen, I don't have logos on my wall or any of that, but I do remember I think it was the 90s, John Van Beesbrook and that Florida Panther team taking on Patrick Waugh and the Avalanche. And I was watching that series very closely. Obviously didn't necessarily go the way I wanted that to, but I've always liked to see the Panthers do well. The Edmonton Oilers, my dad always hated them because he had a thing against Wayne Gretzky. Don't ask me to explain that exactly, but what is the key? Do the Panthers actually have a shot here? Because they always strike me as they're that team that, yeah, they get to the playoffs, but you don't really expect them to do anything. And all of a sudden now here they're sneaky good. They're in Lord Stanley's Cup final here. What do you make of their chances and what they got to do to take the Oilers on?
I think they got a shot. I think anybody who says no is wrong. This team came out of nowhere last year and made it all the way to the Cup with Tkachuk leading the way and Bobrovsky. They will have home ice advantage. Now, the bad thing was, if you're a Panthers fan, is Edmonton ended up winning 2 of the 3 games in Dallas. But, I mean, I feel like the mood is different now. I feel like the Panthers, after last year, it was just, it was a good year. No one expected it. We're happy with losing. Or I shouldn't say losing, but we're just glad we made the Cup. That's not the case this year.
Money, as they say, oftentimes, yes.
Yeah, it's not the case this year. They came in. They won the division. They beat the Lightning for the first time in playoff history. They beat the Bruins again after a lot of people thought they could be on the other side of a 3-1 collapse. And then they beat the President's Trophy Rangers. They beat them at home after they were trailing 2-1 in the series. I do like Florida's chances. I actually do. If you're a Stars fan, just about the whole state of Texas is, you're rooting for the Panthers, to be completely honest. I don't know how many Ranger fans are listening to this or Lightning fans, but at the end of the day, this team has a shot. And the difference between this Cup and the past 2 Cups they've been in 96 and 2023, they have home ice advantage. Their fans are ready. And this is going to be a determining factor for the Panthers of where they go. If they win this Cup, the popularity of hockey in the Miami area grows. The sport is loved more. And maybe if they win a Cup, maybe this is around the time we can get them out of Sunrise and put them somewhere in downtown Fort Lauderdale or maybe closer to Miami.
Oh, the quality of wish. Listen. I know you're not here a local to the state of Florida, Jake, but you're asking an awful lot of a famously fickle fan base. Ooh, there's a triple alliteration there. You can do that. But yeah, that's a lot you're asking for is what I'm saying, Jake.
Oh, I know that. But I mean, look, I have, for the record, I have been to the Panthers arena. I have.
Oh,
I've heard. You have? Okay. It's a nice arena. The problem is it's in the middle of nowhere and the drive is very bad, right by the Everglades. And I have said this, if you bring them closer to Fort Lauderdale or Miami, it would help them draw more. Remember the years in the late 2000s and the early 2010s when the Panthers were bad and nobody went to games there? And part of that has to do with transportation there. If they could get somewhere in downtown Fort Lauderdale or downtown Miami where you can get the transportation there, hockey will draw more. Now, obviously, when you're in the playoffs and in the Cup finals, you're going to draw no matter what. But if they win this championship and they win their first Cup, I think the perspective of hockey completely changes. And I think it happened with the Heat in 2006.
Yeah, no, listen, that's a fine point. All you're going to get me to do is start griping about where the hell is my light rail in the state. But listen, I know I got a Sentinel guy on later, but it's not Scott Maxwell, so I'm not going to talk about the light rail. Okay, that's not what I'm doing. But no, I think you make a bunch of great points. I think there's a law somewhere that since you're a hockey writer, we're on the show and we're talking about Lord Stanley's Cup finals here. You got to give me a prediction. Who and in how many?
Who and in how many? Florida in 6.
Oh, snap. Okay. So Oilers, Boilers, olive oil, Florida in 6. That's what Jake says. Okay. I know that's
what I would say, but don't be surprised if it's the Oilers because McDavid and Draisaitl and them, they've been due for years. This is their best year, but the Panthers, I just think they're so motivated after last year.
It sounds to me like you're describing a pair of teams that are due, and that's a win for hockey fans. Who is the winner in all actuality? America with some quality hockey. Jake, I can't front on any of that. Tell the world where you can be found, Jake Ferraro.
Yes, you can find me on whatahockey.com Bing. You also can find me on the Smoking Cuban Bing. I've been writing for the Dallas Mavericks. The Mavericks are in the NBA Finals. I recently just wrote a piece on Tim Hardaway Jr. And you also can find me for the Black and Gold banner at Bing. I don't know when the shirts or the fleeces or whatever they're going to be shipped, because I know one of the people were wearing them. I don't remember who it was. I think it was Bryson, but hopefully it gets to me soon, and maybe I'll see you in a few months.
Listen, Black and Gold banner at celebrity Bryson Turner should get to be the guy that dons it. I actually had it hand delivered to my house today by the head of the Black and Gold banner at Jeff Sharon.
Okay.
Well, I'm sure we'll be hearing about that on the next night shift pod. Oh, here we go. Bing, we're just pinging. This is what cross promotion is. Take the lesson, ladies and gentlemen. Anyways, Jake, thanks for coming in, Jake. What a good time, man. Appreciate
Thank you, Cal.
Maybe
Take care.
Maybe we'll do this after the finals are over, man. But talk soon.
Sounds
brother.
good. See you.
Right. Jake Ferraro of What a Hockey and Black and Gold Bannerets, covering basketball with Black and Gold Banneret and also hockey. This is what it is. Listen, just diversity in sports coverage. Speaking of guys that are all over among different sports, I mean, I mentioned just how warped my brain is trying to understand the NCAA landscape. And I don't know how much longer will we be calling it the NCAA. It's all nuts. I'm not going to get into particular court cases or drown you in legal jargon per se. I'm just going to help and hope to get the high-level bits, and so I could speak intelligently. And when it comes to speaking intelligently, the essential is here. Matt Murschel, the Orlando Sentinel. What's going on, my man?
Not much. How are you doing tonight, Kyle?
Hey, listen, I'm looking forward to getting a whole lot less confused about college football. I mean, listen, Matt, how busy you've been lately. Not just in football, by the way. Like you went down here to Maitland, you checked out the EA Sports video game for football. You got that. You're covering, of course, regularly stuff with college football and UCF. You a major Mustafa Tiem comes in. UCF's a new basketball recruit. You're talking about that I saw that on your Twitter account. Just go and check it all out. Orlando Sentinel. Ding! But it's a Bing party here. There's so much promotion. This is what we do, folks. But listen, I glad to have you in. And listen, let's go. The kids are here to hear about the video game, I'm sure. We'll start there. And your trip to EA Sports, I got to tell you, first of all, I've had people that worked there, and everything's tight-lipped, but you got in there. You've been cleared to talk about it. You have an article on OrlandoSentinel.com. Bing! Tell us about some of what you saw there.
Yeah, it was kind of a unique opportunity. There was a group of about 24 to 25 of us who were invited in to, take part in this one-day kind of event at the EA Sports Studios and the Creative Village in downtown Orlando. And, it was a mix of, gamers and programmers and a couple of national journalists and myself. And so we had to come in and sign these NDAs, non-disclosure agreements. We had to do the whole thing, so we couldn't, reveal anything until they gave us this embargo date. And then we sat down. It was like a class. It was literally like an all-day class where we got to learn everything about this new college football 25 game, all the different ways to play it, the different modes, the dynasty, way, the road of glory way. And then we had guests. Chris Fowler from ESPN was there. He popped in and talked to us for a while about, kind of his experience of going through it. We had Travis Hunter, who the Colorado defensive back who was in town, and he came over and talked to us about kind of what he went through, being a cover model. And then after all that was kind of done and we had lunch, they said, okay, you guys got 2 hours to play the game. And it was an early version of the game. And it was, I got to say, it was just remarkable. I mean, the amount of effort and work they put into this thing, the what the game looks like, what it feels like. And I always preface everything is I'm not a major gamer, but I mean, just to be able to see kind of the different stadiums, the efforts they put in, UCF bounce house, all that stuff. It was just, it was unbelievable. And it was fun to be a part of that.
Well, and that's something that I feel like they've always tried to capture even in the past. Do you think, first of all, listen, not that everybody here follows UCF. This isn't an episode of the Night Shift with the Black and Gold Band Red. Bing! But like, just as an example of how well they captured that particular venue, like, what'd you think? What's your verdict?
Oh, it was like being there. It was being, like they took painstaking efforts to get to get everything right. The cabanas on the field, the students in the section, they got Zombie Nation. They got 150 songs that they got the rights to. Zombie Nation was one of them. So when Zombie Nation comes on and the fans start jumping up and down, the screen moves as you're playing the game. Wow. That's just to show you kind of the whole. They did the cheerleaders, doing push-ups and stuff after scores. They got nitro running around. The stadium itself, I mean, they worked on lighting. I'm not talking just lighting of the stadium. I'm talking about time of day lighting that they would get from where the sun would be, in regards to the stadium. So you've got the shadows and things like that. So it was next level, and it was. I got an opportunity. Like I said, I played UCF for the first game. KJ Jefferson was in the game. RJ Harvey, Penny Boone, a transfer who hasn't even, I don't think, is officially on the roster just yet. I know he's committed, but he was in the thing. It was an early version of the game, so not all the players were in it. Right. And then again, like as you're getting ready to play the game, it's pick your uniforms. I mean, there were just, it was like, it seemed like dozens of uniform combinations you could pick. They didn't have the space game uniform in yet, but I was told it was going to come. It was coming along, but they were going to put it in there. and I mean, that just makes it to the next level. And then, again, like I said, a lot of the calls, they got all the PA announcements. I know that EA Sports worked with every school to make sure they sent them a form, and the schools sent back a list of all the things that they would do during a game, and it's that realistic. And so, like I said, it was unbelievable. I played I went to Notre Dame and played Notre Dame, in Notre Dame Stadium and felt just like being there, other places as well, Alabama, things like that, Florida. But it was unbelievable. And it was definitely something I think fans were going to gravitate towards.
For the Alabama version, where there are audible cries from the crowd of "Why did Saban have to retire?" No, I'm kidding. No, and that'll be an interesting story too. We'll do that more when it comes to playing actual games of football and what you think of Alabama and on how that all that's going to go. I know there's not. It's tough to read these things at this time of year. I'll put it this. But one question I got to ask, just from my perspective, did you get an opportunity to truck anybody over with KJ Jefferson? I have to ask.
Yes. And, one of the things that I will say is that they worked really hard to make sure that and some of the styles are very similar to the players, and I think you saw RJ Harvey, and KJ Jefferson do some of the things they can do. But there is a new function of the game, which is the wear and tear function, which means you can't just run KJ Jefferson 50 times in a row without there being some sort of, like you get to wear and tear, and the wear and tear can continue on if you're playing different, if you're taking different things, it can carry on throughout the season. So if you're playing a season, you can wear out a guy, to the point where he won't be as effective. And so you have to find a way to shift guys around. And the passing's a little different too as well. And it takes a little getting used to. So I apologize to KJ in advance that I threw a couple picks, early on, because I was trying to learn exactly what the passing mode was. But it's just, like I said, once you get that kind of under your belt, then a lot of it is just, again, game. I think gamers will really get to it, because they'll really enjoy it. So the group that was with us, I mean, the amount of ooh and ahs and cheers and stuff in the room that we were playing in these games was just incredible, because these guys were excited. And it was, even the gamer, it made everyone jump up.
Yeah, the gamer folk are even into it too. Okay, I can respect that too. Listen, I was one of those gamer folk before I had 2 kids. I get it. No, but and that's I'm glad you bring that up too. So yeah, and as for the wear and tear function, well, use it for all the stuff he builds up for UCF fans. Now they may be less inclined to play John Rice Plumlee if he were still on the squad, is what I would probably say at this point. But I do that, the transition. You saw him in Pittsburgh with the Steelers. I want to bring this up just because as kind of a college transition to the pros thing, with the pros adopting the former XFL kickoff, which the UFL now isn't using, whatever. Do you feel like guys like John Rice Plumlee, I know I make jokes about his durability and all that, but like, you think that guys like John Rice Plumlee, who are those mobile even as quarterbacks, could make an impact quickly in the NFL with their athletic skills?
Yeah, I think so for sure. I mean, you see the Steelers. I mean, you look at the Steelers quarterback room, you got Russell Wilson, you got Justin Fields, you got John Rice Plumlee, and you're already hearing stories where the Steelers are working out Justin Fields at different spots. They're putting him at kick return. They're doing him in spots because they want to get his talent on the field. I think John Rice Plumlee is the same way. Now, when I asked him, I said, listen, did the Steelers say you're going to play quarterback? Because, that's been kind of the thing. And he said, no. He said, yes, they said, I want to, they want me to play quarterback. And he said, that's what I want to do. I want to play quarterback. But I'm talking to him earlier. I know he also told me that, listen, I'll do whatever it takes to help this team win, wherever team I go to. He said that before the draft. And so I think if they wanted to use him like a Taysom, like a Taysom Hill type player, where maybe you have, do a couple things here or there in the backfield, anything like as a running back or maybe as a tight end or something. I think he would do that if he felt like that's going to help him get on the field and have a long career. But he really wants to play quarterback. He feels, and you look at their quarterback room, like I said, Russell Wilson, no offense, he's not a guy I think that could go a full season. So you may have, someone else have to step up. If Justin Fields is that guy, then all of a sudden maybe John Rice can work his way to be that number 3 guy. And you just don't know what happens. I think if they like what he's doing, and it appears to be they do, I mean, you could see him being used in different spots. But he's excited. When I talked to him, he's really excited about the opportunity. Feels like that he's worked well, and it's a really good room for him. Because if you think about it, all those guys around him are similar styles to him. They're very guys who can run and throw the ball. And so I think he feels like this is a good quarterback room for him, because in some cases, if you were to go to a team that's, let's say, a pro set, really wants to throw the ball a lot, and maybe not run at all, he doesn't necessarily fit that mold. But I think he fits really well in what the Steelers really want to do this year.
Yeah, no, you're saying a lot of great things, and how can I disagree with them? I cited a number of them in the draft profile I wrote on John Rice Plumlee for Black and Gold Banneret. Bing! And I would be remiss to not bring up one of the more famous plays in recent Steeler history, the X-reverse pass thrown by one Antoine Randall, another former quarterback, making a difference, helping beat the Seattle Seahawks in the Super Bowl in that day. And listen, the guy's got a sunny disposition like Hines Ward as well when it comes to John Rice Plumlee. I can see something happening where he can make a difference with that. But
I agree with that. I think he's got good personality. I think he fits in well. And I think he's worked hard on his passing. It's one of the things he told me during the offseason when he was getting ready for the draft is he worked really hard on that. He worked really hard on getting better at throwing the football. I mean, yes, he can run the ball, but I think every quarterback knows that, all right, I'm going to have to, my skill set's only going to take me so far in a way. I've got to be able to throw the ball and read defenses and do a better job at those things. And I think that's something he worked really hard to try to get better at.
So, and I'll put it this way. I'm sure there's more depth in how he's intending to execute all of that if you check out the article, OrlandoSentinel.com. Bing! Anyways, now let's get to the part. I mean, it's cute that I feel validated with some of the points you made. You're really here for me to put the student of the game tonight, man. There's a lot of stuff going on the college landscape. First of all, at some point, you and I are going to have a frosty adult beverage conversation on how on earth you keep track of all this. Because I know your wife still remembers what you look like. You tell me about you hanging out with her and watching movies and stuff. I don't know when you have time to do it, because you got to keep track of all this. But all that being said, let's go with the thing first that I hear, and this is something that a good friend of mine, Brandon Howard, who is the fantasy football editor for CBS Sports, was on the initial version of the student of the previous run of the Student of the Game podcast. We had the conversation, and I voiced being worried about the pay-for-play model happening. Now we're seeing precedent that we might get there. Kind of tell us how that's transpiring exactly and how big a threat, direct pay-for-play, we'll call it, even though a lot of NIL is that, wide open pay-for-play, what kind of has us there and what's threatening that?
Yeah, well, you obviously know. I mean, the House versus NCAA, court case, which the, that everyone has decided to take the settlement on. It's a $2.8 million settlement. It's essentially going to be a situation for the next decade where, schools are going to have to pay their athletes. They're going to have to pay, and they're going to have to find a way. It can be anywhere from $15 to $22 million a year. And so these schools are trying to figure out, and these conferences are trying to figure out, how do we go about doing this? Because the NCAA is going to provide some of it, but the schools themselves are going to have to find their own way to do that. And right now, looking around, not a lot of athletic departments make a profit. They're not designed to be businesses and to make profits. They're really designed to kind of break even. That's the whole concept behind it. Most don't. Most end up losing money because that's kind of the way things work, especially with the debt, with the debt they incur for doing things with, facilities and stuff like that. So they're going to have to find a way how to make this money and then what they're going to be able to give, especially it's the Power 5 schools that are really going to be involved in this. And so there's a lot of talk about how do we go about doing this? And for some schools, you're looking at, there's thoughts of you may have to drop a sport or two, depending on, non-revenue generating sport, because again, scholarships cost money, you're paying money, and you're going to have to find a way to do that. There's also the talk, and it's very serious about, they're going to put a cap on the number of players, for instance, in football. Like a lot of teams have, 120 to 130 players on a team. They're only supposed to have 85 scholarships, but there's 120 players on a team. Well, right. They're looking at this idea. We can't afford that. We're going to have to start really cutting back that down. And in some cases, it may mean eliminating walk-ons. There's been talk about that. Maybe that's how they go about doing that. So this is the issue right now that a lot of athletic directors and conference commissioners as well are trying to figure out. How do we get to this point? Because the agreement, it's been agreed upon. It hasn't been finalized to the point, and they're going to have to figure that out. And this is essentially revenue sharing. This is essentially what that is. And it goes for the next 10 years. And the reason they decided to agree to this is because they were getting their butt handed to them in the courts over the last decade. And they knew that if they didn't agree with this, the settlement could have been a lot worse. It could have been, I was hearing anywhere up close to $10 billion, billion with a B. And no one could afford that.
Right now, $10 billion, right?
Exactly. And so, they decided to go with this with the idea that they hope that this would avoid any future lawsuits over the next decade. And they hope that maybe, they could figure out a way to kind of get things, maybe a proper plan in place and maybe be able to help themselves out. But this is a kind of pay for play situation where you're going to have to figure out what each student athlete is worth at this point. And not just, it's not just going to be equal among everybody. It's probably going to be generated more towards football and the revenue sports. And then you have to bring in Title IX all this. You have to, Title IX, it's very specific. It says you're going to have to figure out a way how to do all this stuff without, and still make it equal for women's sports. So it's very challenging, talking to, Brett Yormack last week, when he was talking to us about, after the Big 12 spring meetings, he said, we're trying to figure out what we can do. And some of that involves finding new revenue streams. They're talking about now of allowing schools to, sell patches on jerseys, for sponsorships, because that's going to generate revenue. And they're looking at finding other ways on fields and stadiums to generate more spots. And, I know people joke about the idea of like college football players' jerseys looking like NASCAR cars, but it could come to that. It could come to the idea that you can
football.
Yeah. Listen, if Disney, I'm not saying this guy, if Disney wants to buy a patch on, UCF's jersey, for instance, I guarantee if that's going to be a lot of money, UCF takes advantage of that because they're going to find a way to try to generate this money and help out. So NIL's still around, there's still the NIL, but this component basically would allow NIL to, in a sense, be folded into the schools themselves, and that would allow the schools to kind of, take care of their own NIL business, whether that's using the collective that they have in most cases as that third party, almost like hiring a third party to run it, which is what I think a lot of schools will do, or just, kind of folding it together and using it that way. I think that's kind of what's going to happen. And listen, still no one has any idea. Conference commissioners are hoping that the government steps in and they can put some legislation down and they can override some of these states' laws. But to be honest with you, you look around and you think, is that the top priority of the government right now? We're in an election year. You think they're worried about NIL? Most of the time they're trying to figure things out. So this has kind of been it's a huge deal. And as I tell people all the time, college sports is going to change for sure because of this. But, what they're trying to do is avoid having this whole idea of making athletes employees, which is something that I think would really kind of take the whole amateurism out of the model and make it just a professional league.
There's so many threads I want to take this. And Matt, I mean, sooner than later, I may have to have you back on to help me kind of enunciate through it. But you mentioned legal matters being involved. Of course, my co-host in the comments here from the Duval Dive, Travis Holmes, you'll find that on Friday, 11 a.m. Eastern, by the way. He's bringing in something about Florida high schools and NIL. I'm wondering if local government, too, is going to be burdened with handling this aspect, too. Like, how far the far-reaching threads of this are getting ridiculous. And I don't think the federal government is going to step in at that level. Frankly, it can't, in my opinion, because there's talk about just a whole quagmire. Here's the thing. And this is the part where I'm going to present my theory here, and you could tell me how nuts you think it is or isn't. And I mentioned talking about this. It was one of my best pods at the time with Brandon Howard. I mentioned earlier, we were talking about this concept. What exactly, let me rephrase, if the NCAA, and at the time I was against, not NIL, like, listen, if you do a commercial, if you want to sell your jersey, if you want to sell your championship ring, more power to you. I'm sorry you got in that bad a situation that you got to sell your championship ring, because listen, my little semi-pro football ring, you have to pry that off my finger. But I'll say this, I was always against pay for play simply because of the implications you're talking about, having to cancel sports. Title IX being a huge blade that takes college athletics in a way, in a large way, off the mat. Now, I know there's certain ways they can get around things by making club sports and things like that. That's a lot more different. And certainly they wouldn't get the medical attention they need if something went wrong in that scenario. And that was the crux of my thought. If you just give the athletes the proper medical support, if they get a big injury, maybe you pull the scholarship, but you still handle their medical because they gave their body up for you, for example, right? I've seen enough real sports with Brian Gumbel to see ruined careers become ruined lives outright. If they had just covered for that and also made a bigger deal themselves, the NCAA, of putting a dollar value on the marketeering they've done by putting them in football and actually, hey, this is what we actually do for these guys. Do you think the NCAA would still be around instead of getting their pants sued into oblivion?
Maybe. I mean, listen, I've said this for a while. I mean, I'm sorry. I mean, I think the college model was broken for a long time. I mean, and I just don't think that the model worked in the 40s and 50s. I mean, it was fine because college athletics wasn't making the kind of money it was. But the moment that you start creating the BCS and the moment you start generating billions of dollars, and it's not like it's a hidden fact. This isn't a secret that everyone's kept. I mean, you do stories and billions are being, these big agreements. Well, then you had to figure at some point college athletes will look around and say, why am I not getting a percentage of this? Because I'm the one who's out there doing what, giving myself to this. I think you're right. If there had been better healthcare, if they had promised to, hey, we'll pay for, you can go back to school like they do in some places. You come back and get your degree, we'll pay for it. It's part of your scholarship. You don't have to worry about paying for it. Even decades down the road, we'll pay for it. If they had agreed to do that, if they agreed to pay for your medical care for a decade or two after you're done, because there's a lot of guys, I mean, obviously that suffer injuries in college, don't go on to the pros and spend the rest of their life kind of dealing with those injuries. I mean, it would have been nice to have a little bit of help there. I think that would have helped. I think if they had offered even a small stipend, which they started to do, with the Alston case, I think they could have, I think that might have been enough to please everyone. But once they started talking name, image, and likeness, and people started saying, I should be getting a bigger percentage of this, I think that's where we were gone. And like I said, I think that the college model is broken. And I've had people tell me this before, because it's not made like a business. Everyone assumes college athletics is like a business. It's not at all like that. I mean, it's not like you're out there. If you're in the red, you fire people and you start, you try to figure out what's wrong with your product. I mean, like I said, most athletic departments don't make money, and they're kind of built that way for that. And that's why it was donor based, based on heavy participation from donors and boosters and asking for money and getting money. Well, then NIL comes around, and then you've got to split that up a little bit. And there's just so many things that kind of change this. So I think it would be around. It would be a little stronger, maybe, in a way. I'm trying to answer your question I think the NCAA would still be around a little bit stronger, but I think this was inevitable. Once the money got to the point that it is, I think it's hard to turn away. And I always warn people. I know everyone wants to bash NIL. I said there's a lot of good that NIL does. I mean, there are a lot of,
yeah.
I mean, there are a lot of athletes who I've spoken with who use NIL for, you saw, you'll see stories where they'll pay for their siblings to go to college with it, or they'll help their parents out and they'll buy a house or something. I mean, there's a lot of good that comes with NIL, but then there's always those stories of a guy driving a Maserati or a Lamborghini, and and you think, oh, this kid's getting millions of dollars. I've had NIL people tell me those numbers are not accurate, so it's not like they're getting paid. There's very few guys are getting millions of dollars. So
I was at a meeting hearing that same statement with you, if I remember correctly. Yeah.
And so I mean, I think it would have been better if they could have handled it. But again, I think what the NCAA thought at the time was, we're the NCAA. We're a powerful organization. No one's going to go up against us. Well, then everyone started taking them to court, and they found out, well, their court, they had poor court procedures, and all of a sudden they were losing these court cases, and then NIL came about, and it was over after that. But I think the money and the media deals and all that really just kind of flipped the sport on its side. Flipped the sport on its side.
When the conferences became more profitable bodies than the NCAA themselves, which again, the conferences are separate entities from the colleges. So folks, when Matt says athletic departments are in the red, he's not wrong. Conferences do a lot of that money and movement and handle a lot of that. Like, it's structured a lot like, YouTube conglomerates and YouTube channels. The channels themselves aren't necessarily seeing the money that's getting driven in. They just get a revenue share that the YouTube, and I forget the proper term for it, but the YouTube conglomerate, the YouTube network channeling does. It's something I understand, but I'm forgetting the vocabulary at the worst possible time to translate it there for the tech folks.
Monetization? Is that what you're thinking of?
It's not just the monetization. Like, there was something where YouTube channels would get together and form a collective of their own, and then the individual channels would get money from the share. Schools, like the conferences, are that collective, and they get money off of revenue share. But the conference is going to take care of itself first, so it can do that business and negotiate on their half. It's a situation where just because there's a lot of money flowing doesn't mean the schools see all of it. So
no, and then there's and the schools try their best. They get sponsorships, they do marketing, they do things like that to try to go up. But I think what people tend to forget is a lot of schools, their athletic budgets are based on student fees. UCF, for instance, is a great example. Their athletic budget is based on student fees. That's part of their budget. And so that's part of what happens. A lot of schools are that way. State schools, where the student fees help support the budget. In return, the athletic department can help pay that back. Also, when you get facilities and you build buildings and you're upgrading your stadium, that a lot of cases you're taking on debt as a school. And what you're trying to do is it's like a 10-year bond where you're paying it off for the next 10 years. That's how you get in the red, because you're never going to be able to really kind of have money sitting around and laying around. And even if you do make enough more money than you spend, that money usually is tied into something else, and it eventually goes elsewhere. And then COVID, the pandemic didn't help at all. Because the pandemic made a lot of schools, they had like reserves, and those reserves are gone, and they're trying to build them back up again.
All in suddenly something that's become a very silly arms race. And the point you made, listen, not everybody's Notre Dame. Most schools are on par, and I love, it's so often that I'm able to draw from UCF as an example, just because they're both an anomaly and yet a representative of so many schools at the same time. And for those that haven't done the practice of looking at money, an endowment for UCF versus the rest of just their Big 12 counterparts, it's absolutely insane. And if you're a school like that and suddenly, hey, here's this huge price tag, you got to finance athletes for all these sports, and by the way, their women counterparts as well. That's tough. And listen, I know that women's basketball is getting a heck of a stretch. Pretty excited for what's going to be coming down the pike for that. Not for nothing, but again, there's only so much you could do as an athletic department. I don't know what more I can add to that. That's
no, and I'll even use, going back to UCF as an example. They got into the Big 12. The reason they wanted to get the Big 12 was because of money. Was one of the major reasons, and they didn't get a full share. They're not getting a full share of revenue. They're only getting about $18 million this past year, 2023 year. They'll get $19 million next year, and then the year after that they get the full, which should be around $40 million. But you're still competing in the Big 12. So, you got to, everyone else is getting $40-some million to compete in the Big 12. You're only getting 18. So you got to continue to kind of support a team and, travel and do all those things with a lesser budget, one that's been supported by the American Athletic Conference, which was nowhere near that, which is about $8 to $10 million. So that's where I think, people tend to forget that, that you're going to be in the red for a while as you try to work your way out of it and build a budget. That's what AD Terry Mohajir has been telling me for a while, is that, that you're always going to have to make tough choices these next couple of years, because you're not dealing with a full, you don't have a full bank account at this point.
Oh, by the way, by battling marketing monolith, Deion Sanders coaching one of the teams. Like, listen, I have no idea what to expect for that Colorado game, man. We're gonna that's gonna be experience. I was gonna say, you better have your antennas up for that one. I know. I'm pretty sure Bianchi will probably be in the building for that one. I'm sure. That's gonna be a big deal.
Yeah, it's I think that's going to be one of their biggest. They've had to sell it obviously with their season tickets, but I think that's going to be a hot ticket to get. That's one of the ones I think that could be just an unbelievable atmosphere. And let's not forget, now they go to the Gainesville the next weekend to take on Florida. So as I told someone on the radio the other day, that's a game where it could be a trap game. UCF's got to pay attention to that game, because they can't be overlooking Colorado to look at Florida, thinking about the Florida game. So that makes it an interesting an interesting 2-week period for them.
So you're going full Admiral Akbar on Deion Sanders, and sir, I cannot blame you for it. The only reason why I'm not going up and getting my Admiral Akbar action figure from behind me is because I'm too lazy to stand up. But listen, no, all are great points, and I'll. Since we brought up the Big 12, I would be remiss in particular, and I'm not doing this just because of your UCF ties, but and I'm going around. Shouts to Drake C. Toll, Locked On Big 12, Dose Grande. I get it. It was one of his YouTube videos that maybe even realized there was drama with Utah, and now there's not quite as bitter as FSU, I hope, with the ACC, but now there's talk about Utah, and then some Game of Thrones machinations with the Big 12 or something. Shed some light on that. What's going on there?
Well, there's a speculation that, Utah is not necessarily, if something were to open up, let's say the ACC were to, Florida State and Clemson and North Carolina get out of the ACC agreement, the grant of rights deal, the ACC may want to expand. And, so they would obviously look at some other teams out west, and Utah might be one of those teams, and Utah might be drawn to the idea of, okay, maybe we can get more money from the ACC than we can from the Big 12. And it's a scary thought. If you're talking about, opening up realignment again, the Big 12 would obviously have to look around and start to worry that there might be some other members in there, who are only going to be here a short period of time. And it's not like, they're going to make him sign a big, long grant of rights like the ACC, and no one would ever do that. So, So Utah could be one of those schools that's very interested in saying, we'll join, the ACC, especially if it reformats itself and has different schools. And, now these conferences, I've told people this, these conferences aren't geographic anymore. It's not like you can say, well, the ACC would never want, they got Stanford and Cal now for, so you could add a Utah, and you could add some other school, they got SMU now. So you really do go coast to coast and kind of be that way. That's what the Big Ten has done. And obviously, it's going to help them out. And and so has the SEC in a way. But, so if the ACC could do that, Utah's got a lot of financial backing, it would be a huge deal for them. So that's the latest I've heard. Now, Utah has not said, yes, we're going to do this. Right. But because I think everyone wants to see what happens with the Florida State Clemson stuff. But, I mean, if Florida State and Clemson and North Carolina, let's say, or Miami or whatever, if that grant of rights breaks apart, I mean, it's up to anyone's game. I mean, Big Ten could grab, whoever they want, and the SEC could grab whoever they want. Maybe they take Florida State. Maybe they look for a couple other schools to add to that conference, and all of a sudden you're down to 3 conferences, maybe at some point, or I mean, it's just everyone's out for the money grab right now, and if they can find better deals, they're going to see what happens.
Well, and especially with all the fear of the big costs coming down the pike, of course they can't be blamed for being afraid. But first of all, I got one last question, but before I go there, like I guess it's a couple years ago now when Tony Baselli was inducted to the Pro Football Hall of Fame. I covered that for the 3-point conversion. Bing! But on part of it, on the Zoom call leading up to it, they had a press Zoom call. I asked Tony about how he felt about his Trojans of USC being part of the Big Ten, or no. I asked him about the NFL expanding, and then he thought it would be, the NFL going international was a big deal, and he could see a day where spreading the game would be a great theme. And the joke I made to him was that if your Trojans can join the Big Ten, anything is possible. So that was a great laugh seeing that. I had a laugh with a Hall of Famer about this, and now forget it. It's NCAA cataclysm, at this point.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's all over them. And like I said, I mean, again, I think we're fine for a couple of years now. I mean, I don't think there's going to be much movement. But again, that could all change. Depends on what happens with this Florida State lawsuit, and if they get out, and some of the other schools get out, if someone is able to sue the ACC and win, with the grant of rights, I mean, that rips the grant of rights apart and really kind of opens up the whole door. I think ESPN wants to definitely make sure that doesn't happen in some ways, so they'll try to figure out a way if the ACC is going to continue to be what it is. How do you add schools? I mean, maybe ESPN steps in and says, hey, Utah, or hey, whoever, we want to bring you over and you can help, stabilize this conference. I mean, I think there's all sorts of options that can happen. And I mean, it's crazy. I mean, there was, there's so much out there about, think about rivalries. I mean, rivalries just gone out the window. I mean, I was talking about this with one of my coworkers. Oregon and Oregon State, the Civil War, they play again this year, but it's like in September. And I was like, when's the last time their rivalry game was in September? I mean, it's always been at the end of the year. And so we were talking about that being like the third week of the season. I mean, it was just, that's what we've gotten to. There's talk that, I think it was Colin Cowherd suggested that, USC dropped Notre Dame because
God, I saw that.
Yeah, I mean, why make it a difficult? So things like that where rivalries go out the window with all this stuff, and then all of a sudden you're back to, you're seeing teams just kind of be forced to play what they have, and I'm sad to see that because there's some really great games that are out there, and you hate to. I mean, UCF USF is a good rivalry series for this state, but probably won't happen unless the two schools decide at some point, let's schedule some games or let's do it. But I mean, it just isn't going to be a regular thing that people are used to seeing.
I'll leave UCF and USF kind of off to the side. I think USF is plenty responsible for themselves for the reason they're not involved. We don't need to get into that, so I don't get so bitter and resist the urge on behalf of my black and gold banneret brethren to call them the cows. But like with Oregon State, I think you make a good point. Those are two teams that are always of reasonable power, of always, Stanford and Oregon, same kind of thing. The breakup of the Pac-12 got even East Coasters like me to participate. And I hear the lament of some of these rivalries going away. I'm less bothered by them happening at different times on the calendar, Matt, because there are parts of the year that hit that lull. But if you bring these rivalries back and sprinkle them throughout the game, you kind of bring spikes out of the lull, add strength to the weakness. Listen, there's not all change is bad. And I think some of this restructuring, including the way we consume college football, the playoff and all of that, they're finally figuring out, hey, maybe we don't have to have the good stuff on New Year's Day. The Orange Bowl, I think, is what, January 8th? It's on a Thursday or something. Hell, I might even cover that game. That's how convenient that just became for me. So like, I don't think this is all bad. I think I'm going to put this gently. People people of a particular age whose minds are more closed don't see this potential benefit. They're just mad that the cheese got moved.
Yeah, I would agree that, I mean, I said it, I tweeted out this afternoon that, it's going to be weird, playing semifinal games on like middle of January, on a Thursday and a Friday, the national championship's on the 20th of January. And someone pointed out to me, it's also MLK Day and also Inauguration Day. So I'm not sure how that's going to all go over on the same day, but
inauguration's in the morning. It'll be fine.
Yeah, you get it. but my point is, like, I mean, I get it. It's all part of the change. And I mean, I'm a big proponent of the playoff. I think it's going to help get football really kind of get involved. So I'll be interested to see what happens. I think you've seen the changes. You've seen ESPN sub out, TNT, letting TNT cover some of the first round games, on TNT. That's a huge change in the history. And I think you'll see more of that. I think you'll see more opportunities for other channels to get involved in that. I mean, there are changes that are going to happen. I mean, this is part of the sport. I think that as much as I know everyone's upset with, pay for play and this house settlement stuff and all that, I tell people, you're always going to watch football. I mean, whatever happens when that game clicks on, whatever Thursday night of August or whatever, that week 0 game, you're going to watch, because you understand that college football is the fans always return to it no matter what happens.
Man, that's a great point made by you for sure. I mean, football is not dying for certain. We can complain about it. Heck, the noise I made about NBC putting an NFL playoff game on Peacock, but that's not going to. Now, granted, I think they saw that they did lose, air quotes, lose. The viewership was smaller than it would have been for general broadcast, but did they get enough revenue and subscribers to offset it? I can't answer that question, but
Peacock's going to have the Notre Dame Louisville game. A regular season, game is only going to be aired on Peacock. And I've told people, I mean, if you're a Notre Dame fan, you probably got Peacock, but all of a sudden, if you're a Louisville fan, what are you going to do? You're going to have to go get Peacock. So, and I wouldn't shock me if we were going to see more of that in other places. I mean, if Amazon or Netflix or any one of these on streamers gets involved in college football, which we're starting to see a little bit of that, you're going to see some situations where, much like the NFL, where the Thursday night game is on Amazon, you're going to see some of that where you'll see a couple of college games maybe get on a streamer site and you have to watch it from there, because it wouldn't shock me. I mean, it's their way of kind of expanding their business.
Last question, and I've been holding on to this one because we took an awesome thread there. Like, if this were a morning show, Matt, you and I could have had, Matt and the student in the morning and made an entire dang week out of this, I'm sure. But here, I'm going to use Clemson as the example and take that as my bias. Listen, in front of you on this show, I have talked about the shortcomings of the ACC, and an element of this is blue bloods getting fat and happy and now getting supplanted therein because of it. Grant of rights is just a catalyst to that happening. In that same ilk, I cite Clemson here. How many schools of a particular age fall into the Clemson category, whereas they are kind of a house of cards? Meaning Dabo has shown that he is not really embraced NIL and some of the new stuff. And now Clemson's fallen off a bit. There's a reason why FSU passed them up. Over and above, listen, I have been a fan of Coach Norvell since Memphis. I always thought he handled his business. The fact that UCF did to him what they did so many times in conference championships is not his fault. All of that. But Coach Norvell doing what he did to bring FSU back was not a surprise to me. And him passing Dabo, also not a surprise because of his kind of attitude towards NIL and recruiting and all of that. He's definitely an old hat. Kirk Ferentz is embracing it, but you're too good for it. The oldest active college football coach is embracing it, but you're too good for it. I always thought that was interesting. No disrespect to Dabo, but this is just where I'm at. How many programs like Clemson are in a position like that where they're a big name now, but are going to try to make that grab and kind of make their school look like a house of cards and try to jump onto a train, be it the reformed ACC or, God forbid, the Big 12 or any of that. Is that a real thing that you see out there happening that we're not talking enough about?
I'm not sure. I mean, I mean, Clemson's in a unique situation. I mean, you mentioned this. I think Dabo has struggled to adjust to the changing times, and I think that not taking transfers. We're having only one transfer. I think that's come back to bite him. I think really hard, and I think he's starting to realize that some of his comments are really starting to alienate them, and it'll bite him again. I mean, if they don't compete for the ACC, I mean, how many people are going to say, okay, well, the shine's off of Dabo, we got to get someone in here who knows what's going on with that, I mean, and I think before that would happen, Dabo would start to change, because I think he'd realize he'd have to, but I'm not sure about moving to the, how that would, if there's other programs like that would, make the move. I'm sure Dabo would do whatever it takes. If Clemson has an opportunity to go to, let's say, the SEC or the Big Ten and make more money and have more money, I think he would jump at the chance. I mean, I think any coach would almost jump at that chance, because I think you realize that, competing in the future, it's going to be tough competing. It is legitimately going to be tough to compete against the SEC and the Big Ten when your schools are, close to 100, was it 60, 70 million, $80 million a year in media rights money, and you're having to get some money aside for the house settlement for the next 10 years. Well, it's a lot easier to get that money when you're getting that almost from the top. Whereas if you're not, then you're going to have to start making tough decisions. Dabo doesn't want to have to start cutting walk-ons and cutting his roster down. So I think he's probably the one coach of the whole country, really, I think, that, in my mind, that has really kind of not embraced how the future's gone. I mean, Mac Brown, for God's sakes, is over 60. I think he's over 65, and he's at North Carolina, and that guy has embraced everything. He's trying to get.
Coach Ferentz is over 65.
Yeah, I think that says a lot, because I've always said that I felt like this new era of football would probably shorten a lot of careers of a lot of older coaches, because I would think they'd be like, I don't want to deal with this, and I'm tired of dealing with this, and I'm going to go, do whatever. I think that would be the case. But the idea that they're willing to change and willing to keep doing it, I mean, it says a lot. I mean, because there are a lot of young guys. I mean, look at this past offseason. There were a lot of young guys who got out of coaching or went from college to the NFL, because they were like, I'm done dealing with all this stuff with NIL and the transfer portal and all that. I want to go somewhere where everything's kind of set in stone, and I get my players and we go coach, and that's what we do. So I think eventually you're going to see some of these guys. I could see Dabo getting out of the game. I mean, because of this, in some way, but you really have to just kind of, it's those coaches that can adapt and kind of find a way to make it work for them. You mentioned Mike Norvell. I think Mike Norvell is one of the best case scenarios. I mean, he's adapted and used it well. And I think Florida State's just trying to make sure they're on the same page with that.
I mean, if we're going to talk about adaptive coaches, we got to give Coach Malzahn his props too. I mean, we covered it. We don't mention it, but I think we're going to get a phone call. But no, listen, hear me out, because Coach Stoops is already having success in the UFL. All right, The Guardians get revived. Danny Garcia brings them back in the UFL, coached by Dabo Swinney. Boom.
I don't know how that would go over well here, this area, but I will say that. I mean, I would be shocked. I mean, UFL, I think. It would be interesting to see if they expand. I mean, I think the things that's always hurt that league is always expanding way too quick.
Yes.
But I mean, the Guardians had a franchise here. I mean, you'd think that they would. Danny Garcia lives here. I mean, you'd think you'd want to have a franchise here, but attendance never really kind of did what it was supposed to do, and they didn't win. And when you don't win, you're not gonna get people. I mean, it's tough to do.
I'll say this, as a one-win team in the first run of the XFL 3.0. They had better attendance at the start of in their first 3 weeks. I'll be honest, I didn't check the stats since, but in the first 3 weeks, they had better attendance than a team with a better record in the Michigan Panthers. I'm just throwing that out there. By the way, how's a team in Michigan called the Panthers, right? The right Panther is currently in the Hockey Stanley Cup final. Just throwing that. Anyways, enough of my get off my lawn speech. I'm not supposed to be doing that here. What am I doing? Anyway. Matt Murschel, tell the world where you can be found, man.
Yeah, you can go to orlandosentinel.com and check out the latest, or follow me on social media at OS Matt Murschel.
Hey, listen, Matt, I appreciate you jumping on. This was a great conversation. This is one of those moments where I'm going to tell my wife, I am glad we got Scuba certified. The depth we had here tonight was awesome, and we could probably even talk further on all that, and we'll leave that at that. Of course, I am Kyle Nash, the Student of the Game. You can find me on Twitter, Instagram, and Threads at the SOTG. Find me on Facebook as the Student of the Game. Check out my writings with the Jaguar Report, the Black and Gold Banneret, and the 3-point conversion. I am going to be at Jaguar Minicamp next Monday, so we might be talking about a little bit there on Wednesday. That should be fun. Also, check out the Duval Dive I mentioned earlier, Travis Holmes, Friday at 11 a.m. We'll be doing that there. Of course, check all of that out on Spotify's and the YouTubes, and you'll see all of that on the socials I just mentioned and all that happy stuff. In honor, joy, and privilege, special thanks to Jake Ferraro, of course, Matt Murschel, for jumping in. Until next time, everyone, class dismissed.